In a field in upstate New York, there is a monument to a man's leg. No name on it. A boot, a cannon barrel, and a wreath. The man it honors was one of the finest battlefield commanders of the American Revolution. The monument was built so that it would never say who he was. And 7 miles north stands a second monument with the same silence built into it. A stone obelisk, 155 feet tall, 4 niches carved into its sides, 4 spaces for 4 generals, 3 hold statues. The 4th is empty, not unfinished, not damaged. Empty on purpose. Hold on to both of those now. Poughkeepsie, New York, July 23, 1788. A man you have never heard of stands up in a room that needs him not to. He is the most effective opponent of the United States Constitution in the state that matters most. He has the votes, he has the argument, he has everything he needs to stop it, and he is about to give all of it away. His name is Melancton Smith. What he says next either holds the United States together or proves it was never going to work. Before we find out what he does, there are 4 things about New York you were never taught. The deal that started New York was a deal neither side understood. Both walked away celebrating. Only one was right. New York did not sign the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July. Not close. The battle that won the revolution was fought upstate. It was won by a man now remembered as a traitor. And the message that broke Melancton Smith came from another state entirely. Underneath all 4 is one question. What happens to a place built by people history could not quite credit? Let's go back 162 years. Before Europeans named any of this, there was already a democracy here. Not a council, a full governing system, a constitution, 2 houses, limits on executive power, a procedure for removing leaders who abused their office. 5 nations held it together: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. Their founding law was the Guyana-Shigawa, the Great Law of Peace. Historians still argue about when it was written. Haudenosaunee oral history points to 1142. Most academic historians place it between 1450 and 1600. Either way, it predates the United States by at least 2 centuries. A 6th nation, the Tuscarora, joined in 1722. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable. Since 1736, Benjamin Franklin had been printing the proceedings of Haudenosaunee Treaty Councils on his own press. In 1744, he set in type a speech by the Onondaga leader, Canasatego. Canasatego told the colonies to unite the way the 6 nations had. 10 years later, at the Albany Congress, Franklin argued for exactly that. This channel will always be honest with you. Historians disagree about how much influence that actually had. No Haudenosaunee document appears in the records of the Constitutional Convention. But in 1988, both houses of Congress passed a resolution on the question. It said the framers greatly admired the governmental practices of the 6 nations. And here is what almost never gets said in the same breath. Beginning in 1788, the year New York ratified the Constitution, the state began taking Onondaga land. By 1822, the Onondaga Nation held 5% of what it started with. The government that may have borrowed the architecture dismantled the builders. That is not a footnote. That is the history underneath the history. It is the first time this pattern shows up. Someone gets absorbed, erased, or remembered for the wrong thing. 1609. An English sailor named Henry Hudson, working for the Dutch, sails up the river that will take his name. He finds the best harbor on the Atlantic coast, attached to a continent full of beaver. The Dutch move fast. Fort Nassau in 1614, Fort Orange, the future Albany, in 1624. In 1625, they begin building at the mouth of the river, on an island the Lenape call Mannahatta. Here begins the most famous real estate myth in American history. In 1626, the Dutch West India Company acquires Manhattan for goods worth 60 guilders. 218 years later, a New York historian converts that figure into dollars. He gets 24. The world has been laughing at that number ever since. Here is what actually happened. The glass beads were invented. No contemporary record describes beads. The only contemporary source is one letter written by a Dutch official named Peter Schogen in November 1626. It says the island was purchased for the value of 60 guilders. That is all. It does not list the goods. It does not name Peter Minuit. That came later. In today's money, 60 guilders is worth somewhere around $1,000. Not nothing. But that is still not the real story. The real story is that the Lenape almost certainly did not believe they were selling anything. In Lenape practice, land was not property. It was not something that could be handed permanently from one people to another. What they understood was shared use, access, and alliance. Both sides went home convinced they had made an extraordinary deal. Both sides were describing completely different transactions. And in those first years, the settlers depended on the people they believed they had bought the island from, for corn, for food, for the knowledge of how to survive a winter here. New Amsterdam grew anyway. By 1643, a visiting Jesuit named Isaac Jogues reported what the colony's director told him. Men of 18 different languages were living on that island. It was a city built on trade, not theology. The Dutch West India Company did not care what God you prayed to. It cared whether you were profitable. That unusual city was about to be taken, and almost nobody fought back. 1664. King Charles II decides he wants New Netherland. He gives it to his brother James, the Duke of York, as a gift. James does not own it. That is treated as a detail. 4 English warships sail into the harbor. The Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant, comes apart. He tears up the English ultimatum with his hands. He shouts at his colonists. He begs them to fight. They look at the warships. They look at their ledgers. They choose the ledgers. The colony surrenders without a shot. September 1664. New Amsterdam becomes New York City, named for a man who had never set foot on the island. Over the next century, the colony becomes the most strategically valuable ground in North America. The best port, the center of the coastline, the gateway between the ocean and the interior. By 1771, a colonial census counts more than 168,000 people here. The Park Service estimates nearly a third of the war's engagements would be fought on New York soil. And yet, on July 4th, 1776, New York was not in the room in Philadelphia. Not figuratively, literally. New York's delegates had written home saying they had no authority to vote. 12 colonies committed. New York abstained. 5 days later, its provincial Congress met at White Plains and endorsed the Declaration. The most famous founding document in America was approved without the state that would define America. That is the New York pattern. Arrive late, then become the thing nobody can do without. Remember the monuments. 4 niches, 3 names, 1 empty space, and a boot. October 7th, 1777. Farmland 9 miles south of a town then called Saratoga. The British had a plan. 3 armies would converge on Albany, seize the Hudson, and cut New England off. Isolate the rebellion. End it before France could get involved. Two of the three armies never arrived. General John Burgoyne led the main force, roughly 7,500 men, south from Canada. He expected support from the west and from New York City. Neither came. He pressed on. The forest slowed him, his supply line thinned, his scouts were ambushed. Waiting for him was the American Northern Army under General Horatio Gates. Gates had been reinforced by General Benedict Arnold. They did not get along. Gates wanted to dig in. Arnold wanted to attack. Gates removed Arnold from command and handed his troops to General Benjamin Lincoln. On October 7th, the British attacked. The American line held, then bent, and then Arnold rode out onto the field. No command, no orders, no authority to be there. He drove into the middle of the fighting, rallying men who thought he was gone. Gates sent an officer to bring him back. The order arrived after it was over. Arnold led the assault that took the Bremen Redoubt, anchoring the British right. A musket ball hit his left leg. Then his horse was shot and fell on it. The leg shattered. The British line broke. Burgoyne surrendered 10 days later. Roughly 5,900 British and German troops laid down their weapons. The news reached Paris on December 4th. France signed a treaty of alliance with the United States on February 6th, 1778. Without the French Navy, without Yorktown, the revolution very likely ends in British victory. The battle that saved the revolution was fought in New York. The man who turned it defected 3 years later. His name became a synonym for treason. The niche on the obelisk stayed empty. In 1887, a Union veteran named John Watts de Peyster paid for a marble boot. It has an inscription. It honors the most brilliant soldier of the Continental Army. It never says his name. It is the only monument in the park that does not name the person it honors. Not because history forgot, because history could not decide. Stop here. This is where the whole thing resolves. New York was built by people absorbed, erased, or remembered for the wrong thing. The Lenape kept the settlers who displaced them alive and lost land they never agreed to sell. The Haudenosaunee built a democracy the framers admired. Onondaga territory fell by 95% after ratification. Arnold turned the battle that saved the revolution. His name became a word that means traitor. In every case, the act and the credit went to different people. Which brings us back to Poughkeepsie. The war ends in 1783. The Articles of Confederation are failing. No national currency, no national taxes, no federal courts. In 1787, delegates meet in Philadelphia and write a new constitution. New York splits down the middle. Governor George Clinton is the most powerful man in the state. He wants nothing to do with a strong central government. He leads the Anti-Federalists. They believe concentrating power in a distant capital is trading one king for another. They are not being unreasonable. His opponent is Alexander Hamilton, the only New York delegate who signed in Philadelphia. Hamilton knows what most of the state does not. If New York refuses, the Union is crippled. New York sits at the center of the coastline. It controls the best port on the continent. Without it, the country has a hole in the middle. So Hamilton starts writing. With James Madison and John Jay, he produces 85 essays defending the Constitution. Hamilton claimed 51 of them. Modern analysis gives about a dozen of those back to Madison. They ran in New York City newspapers at a pace that borders on compulsive. It does not work. When the delegates gather at Poughkeepsie on June 17th, Anti-Federalists outnumber Federalists 2-1. The votes are counted before the debate starts. Inside the courthouse, Hamilton argues. Clinton holds. And rising again and again to meet Hamilton point for point is Melancton Smith. Smith is not in the history books the way Hamilton is. No musical, no monument. In that room, he was Hamilton's equal. He had thought hard about what a distant government could become, and he had the votes to stop it. Then a rider arrives. Hamilton had arranged with Madison months earlier to send an express the moment Virginia voted. Virginia was the last large state outstanding. If Virginia ratified, 10 states were in, with or without New York. On July 2nd, 1788, the news reaches Poughkeepsie. Virginia ratified 88-78. Hamilton reads it into the room. Then he makes an argument that is not technically a threat, but works like one. If New York stays out, New York City will leave the state and join the Union alone. The upstate counties can watch from outside. This is not a bluff. The merchants and bankers of the city want in. 2 days later, on July 4th, it turns physical in Albany. About 50 Anti-Federalists march out of town, fire 13 guns, and burn a copy of the Constitution. Federalists march in response. A Philadelphia newspaper described what followed as a general battle, with swords, bayonets, clubs, stones, street fighting over a document meant to hold a country together. Melancton Smith does the arithmetic. He can keep his position and lose his state, or he can break with his allies and preserve something larger than himself. On July 23, 1788, Melancton Smith stands up. He tells the convention he will support ratification without conditions, amendments recommended not required, and a call for a second national convention. The room goes quiet the way rooms go quiet when something cannot be taken back. The man who had the votes to stop the Constitution had just handed them over. July 26, 1788. The vote is called, 30 in favor, 27 against. New York becomes the 11th state, a margin of 3. If 2 delegates had voted the other way, it fails. And the United States begins as a 10-state union with a hole in its center. But Smith's side extracted a price. New York attached a long list of recommended amendments. The convention sent a circular letter to every other state, calling for a second convention. Madison hated that letter. He wrote to Washington that it had, in his words, a most pestilent tendency. He also knew he had to answer it. New York's proposals joined those from Virginia and Massachusetts. Madison built his amendments out of that pile. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to a fair trial, powers reserved to the states and to the people. The Bill of Rights exists in part because the people who lost at Poughkeepsie refused to lose quietly. In April 1789, Washington was sworn in as the first president at Federal Hall in New York City. The country that had barely been talked into keeping New York was now run from New York. The capital moved to Philadelphia in 1790. Albany became the state capital in 1797. Melancton Smith died of yellow fever in July 1798. He lived long enough to see the Bill of Rights ratified, long enough to know that in losing, he had won something real. He did not live long enough to be remembered for it. Hamilton got the musical, the $10 bill, the monument. Smith got a footnote. Go back to that field in upstate New York, a marble boot, a cannon barrel pointed at the ground, an inscription that praises a soldier and refuses to name him. 7 miles north, an obelisk with an empty fourth niche. Both exist because Benedict Arnold saved the revolution and then betrayed it. Nobody could work out how to hold both facts at once. So they left a space and carved a boot. New York is that monument. Built on a transaction the Lenape never understood as a sale, defended at Saratoga by a general whose niche is still empty, brought into the Union by a man whose name you had never heard before today. He gave up the only weapon he had because he decided the alternative was worse. There is a boot in a field in upstate New York with no name on it. There is a man named Melancton Smith who saved a country and became a footnote. New York was built by people history could not quite credit, and it became the state America could not afford to lose. 4 things you were never taught, and 1 man who decided a country mattered more than being right. Which one landed hardest? The deal nobody understood, the empty niche, or Smith giving away the votes? Tell me in the comments. And if you want the next state, subscribe. 1 state per episode. The real version.